State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict, we the jury find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all.
The verdict in a Florida courtroom that stunned millions of Americans across the country. 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by George Zimmerman 2 years ago this week. Zimmerman claimed self-defense and was acquitted on second-degree murder in July. Days later, Trayvon's parents came on this show to express their shock.
I broke down because I was in disbelief. I just didn't, I couldn't understand why the jury came back with the verdict that they did.
When the verdict came, it just seemed like, wow, you can get away with murder.
2 years later, a new book is raising some provocative questions about the trial and about race and justice in America. It's called Suspicion Nation, the inside story of the Trayvon Martin injustice and why we continue to repeat it. And the author, Lisa Bloom, is very harsh on the prosecution. She writes, quote, "Yes, the prosecution blew it. The overlooked evidence, lack of witness preparation, and poor strategic choices made by the state's attorneys were nothing short of astonishing." Joining me now is Lisa Bloom, a legal analyst for the Today Show and Avo.com. She's also a frequent guest on this show during and after the Zimmerman trial. Thank you for being here, Lisa.
Thank you, Reverend.
In your book, you highlight this photo. George Zimmerman showing police where his gun was holstered the night of the shooting. Why did you say this is an example of how the prosecution dropped the ball in the trial?
Because this should have been one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. This is what the prosecution should have started with. This is what they should have ended with. This is what they should have shown witnesses on cross-examination. This is what they should have called an expert witness to talk about. Because George Zimmerman showed in that photo, and 2 other times on a videotape, that his gun was holstered behind him. He claims that he was lying on his back, Trayvon atop him, when Trayvon saw the gun, reached for the gun, and threatened to kill him. That's physically impossible if the gun is holstered behind you and you're lying on your back. The prosecution was blind to this piece of evidence, and that was really my eye-opener, my wow moment when I was covering the trial every day on your show, Reverend Al. I thought, if they're missing this, what else are they missing? And so when this case was over, you know, I thought I was done. I thought I would move on to the next case, but it really disturbed me. And I had to go back and conduct new witnesses, talk about what happened in the jury room, talk about what didn't happen in the case that we weren't seeing. I thought that was the big story, and that's what I reveal in my book.
Now, Juror B29, known only as Maddie, was the only minority on the 6-person all-woman jury. A couple of months after the verdict, here's what she told you. Here's what she said to me.
But just to know that in my heart, you know, you feel that a person is guilty, but when it comes down to the law, they give you so much that you could work with. You know, it makes not only feel, it makes me feel worse the more I hear about George Zimmerman.
Now, that's what she told me, but what she told you that was truly stunning of what was going on in the jury room. She said one juror, quote, "knew more than we knew. From pre-trial publicity, she knew that Trayvon Martin was, quote, a bad kid. The juror also knew that Trayvon was, quote, intentionally behind Zimmerman, that he knew he was going to hit him, and that he planned his own death." Lisa, none of these points were mentioned during the trial. How did this make it into the deliberations?
It's really sickening, and it's really disturbing, Reverend Al. I opened the book with Maddie's story. I spent a considerable amount of time with her. She and I are really friends now. She and I have been texting the last couple of days. She cannot get over this case because she feels that the weight of Trayvon Martin's death is on her shoulders. And when she tells the story of what went on, not only in the jury room during deliberations, but during those 3 weeks of sequestration, I was shocked. I mean, I think it raises serious questions about whether racial profiling was going on in the jury room. How cruel the 5 white women were on that jury to Maddie, how they demeaned her, how they mocked the way that she spoke, how she was treated differently inside the jury room. And it's a real microcosm to me of what this case was all about. You know, I think there was racial profiling going on.
Give me an example. I mean, what do you mean mocked her and treated and isolated her and treated her differently? Did she give you examples?
Yes, yes, and I have the examples in the book. For example, she referred to ramen noodles as Roman noodles. They all laughed at her. They made fun. Oh, Maddie, you don't know how to talk. One of them was allowed to bring her dog in for 9 hours on a weekend because she was lonely. Maddie wanted to bring in her 3-month-old infant, and she was denied that on the ground that supposedly the child could talk. There was a deputy stationed outside of Maddie's hotel door. She thought, is that just a coincidence, or is it because I'm the only non-white juror? The same kinds of questions that people of color have to ask all the time when they're followed and watched by law enforcement.
There was a deputy outside her door, but there wasn't outside of the other jurors' doors?
Correct. That's right.
Wow. I mean, you write a lot about race in this trial, that at the root of this entire case is, quote, unspoken fear that African Americans are criminal, that fear is often armed, locked, and loaded, and so the body count continues to rise in an atmosphere of lawlessness. Was race a part of this trial, whether the prosecution wanted it to be or not, Lisa?
There's no question about it. The defense is the one that brought race into the case, comparing Trayvon Martin to a couple of African-American burglars that he had absolutely no connection to, except for shared skin color. You know, I was driven to write this book, Reverend Al. I had to expose what went on in that courtroom and what we didn't see the first time around, because I feel this is an iconic case. I feel that the story had to be told, but it's bigger even than just the Trayvon Martin case. We see it again in the Jordan Davis shooting, Renisha McBride, and all of the other young people who are unarmed, who are considered suspicious in this country. It's got to stop, and I felt that the least I could do would be to expose it in my book.
Lisa Bloom, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Reverend.
And again, the book is called Suspicion Nation.